to another cross-border talks where we are heading our attention towards the forthcoming Marxist Feminist conference in Warsaw, which will take place on the 16th, between 16th and 18th of November 2023. And we are joined today by one of the members of the academic committee of this conference, Ewa Majewska. Ewa Majewska is a feminist activist and philosopher. She works at the SWPS University in Warsaw, and she's the author of the book Feminist Anti-Fascism. Welcome, Eva. And now my colleague Veronica will ask the first questions.
Okay, hello.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Eva, for your time. And I would like to start with the first question, which is maybe more general, because we live in times when many suppose they understand the terms they are using, especially we know it from media and from politicians. So I would like to actually, if we discuss feminism, I would like to ask you what do you feel is feminism today, and specifically, what are its most important tasks in recent social struggles, according to your opinion?
Mm, Thank you very much for having me, and I'm very happy that we can talk about that. And really like this first question because, as you said, we assume we know the notion. So I think the most popular notion of feminism is actually has a lot to do with equality between men and women. So it is a liberal notion which suggests that when women will have the men's status, feminist mission is going to be accomplished. So this is a bad notion of feminism. This is the one that I'm really not very happy with. However, this is the one that I hear being discussed a lot. So why do I not like it? I don't like it because I think it is very reductive. I think genuine feminism, or the feminism that I'm, you know, happy with and that I would like to promote, is a theory and also a practice or a version of political agency, which takes as its beginning the experience of being socialized and educated and growing up as a woman in order to understand different versions of inequalities, different versions of discrimination, different versions also of alternatives to neoliberal capitalist patriarchy. So for me, feminism is rooted in a version of socially constructed experience, embodied experience also, in which people learn to be sort of second class, second category humans, and also in which they build their emancipatory claims. And then, so feminism is not for me reduced only to the questions of men and women or masculinity, femininity. It is more about challenging a version of society in which there are privileged and underprivileged people, in which the natural order is seen as something hierarchical, where a version of leader or God is on the top, and then there are men and women and slaves or people who are underprivileged or people who are discriminated for whatever other reasons, such as sexual orientation or class or religion or ethnicity. So, so for me, feminism is quite a large doctrine, I would say, and I'm not afraid of the word. It's quite a large ideology. I would also say this word. It's a large theory in which which begins with the experience, embodied and socially constructed experience of femininity, but then it goes much further and it embraces also the experience of other discriminated forms of life, and it builds utopias, or it builds alternatives which challenge the status quo. Also, a big part of feminism is critique of the existing society, and is also autocriticism. I think this is what Bell Hooks, one of my favorite feminist authors, repeated many times, that feminism has this amazing ability, sometimes which sometimes becomes an obstacle to autocritique. So feminism is the social movement and is the theory which is probably the most autocritical of all political positions, of all theories, and of all versions of activism that we know. And this is good because it means that we try to amend our theoretical standpoint, our political claims, our forms of activism, our forms of being as well. And we tend to try to also see the problem on our side, not just on the external side of whoever would be the criticized or the contested party. So for me, feminism is an effort to build egalitarian society driven rather by solidarity and altruism than by competition and struggle. I don't think we need to erase conflict from our worldview. I think feminists can very well be dialectical or Marxist, for that matter. But I do think that a certain idealistic version of the society would be one in which those conflicts are being solved respectfully and with care for everyone. So that would be the difference between my vision of feminism and the liberal vision of feminism, in which we focus on individuals and their rights rather than on the social composition of the humans and also inhumans. And so this version of feminism that I support also has very strong economic claims and disagrees with neoliberal economy very much.
Mhm.
So I think that the economy focusing on competition, on income generating, on immediate gains, and unequal division of labor and division of profits is absolutely in disagreement with feminism. So that would be one of the, and also my feminism is very anti-TERF. So I need to emphasize that a lot, that for me, the feminist struggle um, teaches us to embrace other struggles, and also the struggles of the trans and non-binary persons. So I don't understand how people who are in any way against trans or non-binary people can call themselves feminists. I think this is against the core presumption, which is that being discriminated against and being oppressed solely for the reason of identity is wrong. So therefore, I would say that I'm quite extremely anti-TERF. That would be the general answer. I could go on, but I believe you have other questions, so I'll let you ask them, please.
Yes, thank you for this very large definition, which I personally like, and I think you make sense for people who didn't have idea about what is feminism today. And I will now use opportunity that we had elections in Poland, and you are the Polish person, and I am from Czech Republic actually originally. So I have to ask you about the what are you expecting is going to happen in Poland after the election? Because we know that at least what is showing the results of election, we don't know yet what kind of government Poland will have actually, but it seems it will have a different government, most probably, after some struggles, which is more, let's say, liberally leaning.
Mhm.
So, what do you expect from his government in terms of the women rights? Because we have seen that the social conservative and nationalist PiS and their allies were actually pushing in last at least 4 years very, let's say, conservative vision of women rights. I mean now the abortion laws and other. We have seen also the huge resistance in Poland about this in
Mhm.
protest. So what is your expectation here?
So I tend to be quite Luxembourgian on expectations about politics in general. So I'm thinking that we're going to witness many failures, and we just need to be ready
Mhm.
for all kinds of failing strategies on our side, on the side of the future government, on the side of the current government, which still
Mhm.
um, maintains the privileged position, because the Polish president just declared today that he would like to give a chance to Kaczynski's party. So, although Kaczynski's party didn't gather enough votes to have the parliamentary majority, the president still is willing to give them a chance to form the government, although they have no chance to form a government. They don't have enough allies and they don't have enough of their own parliamentary seats to form the majority. So we're going to witness in the next 3 4 months, we're going to witness a lot of struggle and a lot of negotiation and a lot of also efforts to buy different people,
Mm.
to convince them to change the positions. But my expectation is also a different one. So this was a very concrete vision of political moves. But there is another thing which is very important with the result of the election. With many feminist friends here in Poland, we share this experience of waking up in a different country. And this is extremely
Mm.
important because for the last 8 years, we've been living in a country which was governed by two versions of state of exception, I would say. On one
Mm.
hand, we had many rather fascist policies and political decisions being taken basically every day. So we had the Polish-Belarusian border and the atrocities on that border towards racialized refugees. We had anti-women's anti not just anti-feminist but basically anti-women legislation being pushed,
Mm.
like for instance the larger ban on abortion than already existed. We had anti-gay, anti-trans, anti-LGBTQ and plus declarations, statements, efforts of changing the law. We had very tragic moments in our in the context of labor. So we had people dying in workplaces because of exhaustion. So, for instance, we had doctors and nurses who were dying while doing their work. We had people in Amazon,
Mm.
Polska. At least one person died because of exhaustion in the COVID time. So this was a situation of, and the government did not really intervene much, and they could. So basically, we had the state of exception, the situation of treating certain categories of people as enemies, as less than human. But also, we suffered from something that I tend to call affective state of exception, which consists in being constantly triggered by such political decisions and statements that cause very intense and very difficult emotions, such as fear,
Mm.
such as anger, such as anxiety, etc. So both levels of, and we've been living like this for 8 years. So anybody who has in any way progressive position and mindset was waking up every day to some new atrocities and to some new hate speech that were triggered by the government. So the biggest difference after the election now is that we don't wake up with this packet of anxiety, of fear, of um, new unacceptable political decisions or situations that we have to face and act up against. So we've been already exhausted after 8 years of protesting against everything, in favor of women, in favor of gay rights, in favor of refugees, in favor of workers. All these struggles were happening on daily basis very intensely. So I would say we on the opposition side, and here I don't make much discrimination between the leftists and the liberals, because many liberals really were engaged in criticizing the conservative government as well. We've been exhausted basically. So right now, on one hand, we're going to witness a lot of very funny moves on the political scene, but on the other hand, we at least don't have this exhaustion, anger, anxiety on daily basis in our affective lives. So this is a fantastic change. So I'm really happy of that. And this is actually the first effect. And my expectation is that eventually we're going to have a government formed by the liberals, the socialists, and the third way, which is I don't know what, conservative centrists, I would say. And that government could bring some changes to the situation of women, could bring some changes to the situation of refugees. But for this, actually, I don't want to guess. We have to wait. But there is quite a large possibility that some progressive changes are coming.
Okay, I'm happy finally there is some ground for cautious optimism in Poland. But the world is bigger than Europe, and in the second part of our episode, I would like to point our attention to some regions in the Middle East and the position of women or the fight of women in them. I would like to start with the very curious case of Iran, where uh, it's known that it's Islamic Republic, but at the same time, it's a country where very many women are educated and intellectual, and there is a feminist literature for decades in Iran. And in September 2022, we saw the outburst of important protests in Iran. which were dealing with feminist struggles and against too strict control. I have the feeling here there's a number of issues which might be interesting for you to take up. One thing is that generally, is there Islamic feminism? I want to ask. This is maybe the first thing. When women in the Middle East protest, and it is natural for women of Europe to look sympathetically towards them. Is this the same type of feminism which we see, or isn't the situation in which some countries are in the periphery making their feminist struggle different and their feminist agency different?
Mm, this is a very interesting question. However, I have two remarks concerning the very formula, the very form in which you ask this question. One is that you were very delicate, I think, about describing the situation in Iran, because I believe what women and their allies were fighting with in Iran since last year, since September last year, was actually a feminicide, a genocide against women. This was the object of criticism. It was not. It was not the conditions of labor or the hairdressing or this kind of things. It was actually the active effort of the state of Iran to erase women, basically to kill women. So the situation in Iran was much more dramatic than it was described. So I would like to make this remark so that we go further with a slightly different perception, because I wouldn't reduce the protests in Iran to hairstyle or to education or to women's rights in this mild way. I would say that it is the right to live as a woman that was at stake over there. And also, another thing is that I find it very problematic to speak about Islamic feminism, because if we would like to speak about Islamic feminism, we would also have to speak about Catholic feminism or atheist feminism or otherwise, segregate feminisms into religious or regional or cultural contexts, which we don't do. We don't talk much about European feminism, for instance, especially because it's perceived to be so diverse, right? It's very different what the feminists did in France. In France, even you have also Marxist feminists, you have écriture féminine and this whole literature, sort of postmodern current of feminism. So I, I I'm quite opposed, to be honest, to the notion of Islamic feminism. Also because within the countries that are seen as Islamic, we have Marxists, we have postmodernists, we have traditionalists. Feminisms are feminisms. They are not in any way, I think, influenced by solely by the cultural context. They grow as disagreement with inequality, with the oppression and discrimination of women, with treating women as a resource, as a source of unpaid labor and invisible labor, as a source of reproductive forces. And this contestation is very similar in Poland, in Iran, in the USA, in Brazil, everywhere. So for me, the concept of Islamic feminism is actually an idea coming from Europe, an idea which is based in our effort to understand the world by regions. And I don't think this is the best option to look at the world, basically. So I would talk about women in Iran or feminists in Iran, but I wouldn't be happy to call them Islamic feminists, because they might be against Islam, or they might want to preserve certain version of Islam, but also they might want to encourage Marxist economy, for instance, at the same time. Or they might be atheists and fighting with religion as such. There are very, very different feminists in the region that we try to convey. So I think this is actually also an answer to your question in some way. I think that in the region which is perceived as Islamic. We have Rojava women, we have Palestinian women, we have Iranian women, we have women in Iraq and Afghanistan building quite slightly different versions of feminism. But what unites them is not, Islam is not the biggest question for feminists. Nowhere, even not even in countries where Islam is the biggest religion. The biggest question for feminists is always, I think, and has to be always, the situation and position not just of women but also of all these sectors of culture, of society, of economy, which are perceived as feminine. So reproduction, so invisible labor, so care sector, and other sectors where what is perceived culturally to be feminine is being abused and discriminated against in the same time. And I believe that in Islamic regions of the world, as well as everywhere else in the world, women have very different answers to those problems. So while I admire, so this is maybe the one thing that makes a slight difference. What I admire about the women in Islamic countries now fighting for their rights and for equality and for feminism is that they are amazingly brave. The courage to be a feminist in those places in the world um, is basically amazing. So that would be maybe the one difference that I see. I'm not sure if I answered your question in the way you liked it, but that would be my answer to your question.
It's not about liking, but about understanding, and I'm pretty much satisfied with what you answered because I understand it's important to have perspectives on the struggle of women everywhere. And I thank you also for referring to Rojava because I also wanted to bring this perspective from the Middle East. We know that Rojava society is a very curious society based on self-governance with women soldiers and a society which kind of inspires Western people for asking for more from in terms of empowerment of people. So I wanted to ask you in this sense, what are the contributions which you may find in, let's say, feminist contributions which the experience of Rojava can offer?
I believe that this experience is quite particular and also extremely inspiring. So, as far as I understand and know of Rojava as political project, it is one that accomplishes many leftist and feminist utopias, many versions of society, of egalitarianism, of equally shared duties, of political proceeding that we have been dreaming of and sometimes also trying to practice in a very small scale of our groups, of perhaps maybe regions in Europe, but not really in the large scale. So I would compare Rojava a little bit to the early Solidarność in 1980-81, not because Solidarność was such a widely feminist movement, because it was not, but because they both challenged the status quo and did something completely unexpected. If you look at the reactions to Rojava and to Solidarność in 1980, in the countries where they happened, but also everywhere else in the world, there is a huge surprise that these things are possible. So for me, Rojava stands for something I would call a possibility of the utopian project today. We often think that utopias are distant from status quo, from our reality, and then when they happen, when actually some groups of people, some hundreds or thousands of people decide to make it happen, we either deny it or treat it as an exception that cannot be repeated anywhere else. So we have this very distancing position, which doesn't make much sense because it actually did happen. So therefore, we could maybe feel more inspired to put some effort and do them in societies which perhaps don't have this wildly violent approach to women, such as European ones. So I think Rojava is a reminder of how lazy and comfortable we have become in other parts of the world. This is what Rojava stands for me, predominantly.
Okay, so I think this was next episode of Cross Border Talks. We were talking with Polish feminist activist and philosopher Ewa Majewska, and we were talking about feminism from different angles. We were not staying only in Europe, but we were trying also to speak about it from the perspective of non-European experiences or not European societies. I hope you enjoyed our talk as I did because it was, I think, very interesting. And I will remind everybody that cross-border talks are on different platforms. We have website. You can listen us on SoundCloud. You can see us on YouTube channel. We also have several social media where we are present. And of course, you can also subscribe our Substack. Thank you very much, and I wish you a nice day or evening or whatever time you are listening to us. Thank you, Eva, for your time and your interesting answers.
Thank you very, very much for making this interview, and I wish you also a good day and maybe some more revolutionary context in which we will see each other soon, hopefully.
Hopefully.